steering wheel. Loves the steering wheel, yeah. Give him steering wheel. Hey, steering wheel. Somebody tell him to give it to him. Come on! Whoa!
You like my bass? You like it?
How the that's possible?
I'm driving like a grandma. Get that, Ralph? Did you hear me? No more radio. The rest of the race. Ralph, acknowledge. Now, come on, close him down and kill him. We've got a lunatic on the track down the Hanger State.
I am so annoyed.
Welcome back inside the Parc Fermé for podcast number 750. Can you believe it, folks? 750. That's amazing.
Do it live!
So this is Todd. Yep.
No, Todd, not now!
AKA Negative Camber. You know why I've asked you here.
You must convince the villagers that I'm harmless.
That's exactly what I need you to do. Tonight, for your kind consideration, we've got some F1 news, and we're going to talk about that F1 news. But you know what I have to do before I get into the F1 news? I got to go all the way to the right coast of this glorious nation, nestled in our nation's capital, where she does things no other human could understand. It's like math and questions and stuff. You know her. You love her. It's the lovely, the redoubtable Grace. How you doing tonight, Grace? I got to tell you right up front, man, the McLaren gear is awesome.
Ready.
Loving it.
I was just going to say, there are plenty of people that do what I do. It's not just me, but
No,
yes.
I like to pretend you're the only one.
Okay, that's flattering. I'll take it that way. But yes, no, right? 3 races. They were a bit exciting.
Huh? How about that? I bet that was not in your fantasy GP pick.
It wasn't.
That McLaren would take 1-2.
But we're also like, 456. So, I think we're like 40th or whatever. And Fart of Racing is beating us again. Like that's my only competition, right? Because I'm nowhere near you and Paul. So
right.
Yes,
that's exciting. Well, you had to be excited.
I was
you
very
got
excited.
Lando and your boy Danny Rick up there winning it.
So, but the thing is that it was very like, I had things to do that day, right? So you're like, okay, we're going to watch the race. We'll eat some breakfast. And after the race, we're going to do this thing. And we're going to do this thing. So I sort of was like thinking about the other things that we had to do that day. And then it was like, oh, I actually have to pay attention. Like I just assumed it's going to be Monza, right? Whatever. Yeah. So I was kind of like moving on to the next things. And I was like, no, scoot back, focus on this moment. So yeah, super excited. And I'm glad that, it was on there. It wasn't like, Jensen Button's championship, right? It wasn't just like everybody else sucked, everybody else fell off the island, therefore, Ricciardo won. He won on his own volition. I mean, it would have been a different race if Max and Lewis had still been in there, but I don't think it would have been. It wasn't just like David Coulthard took out 18 of the 20 cars and therefore they won, right?
I love a Spawn 98 reference. It's awesome.
I
but you had to be sitting there watching this whole time. And then when Max and Lewis were like, you were like, oh my gosh, we are going to win this thing.
So the best was, I have a friend that also watches it. My friend Hillary, shout out to Hillary.
Hey,
but
Hillary.
I was behind, we were behind by like 10 minutes. So she just texted me. She goes like, oh no. And I'm like, what? And it's like, oh no. I'm like, did you see that pit stop? She's like, oh no, you're behind.
Yeah.
Just wait. But that's exactly what it was. It was just sort of like, oh my God, did you see that pit stop? That was terrible. Oh wait. This gets worse. So
I know.
It was a bit crazy, but I'll take it. Monza, my new favorite track apparently. It's different every time.
Yeah. Well, we used to joke that in the recent past with McLaren, you and I would joke all the time. It's like, oh, well, bring on the Hungaroring, 12 times, right?
Right.
But here it is at the Cathedral of Speed, and McLaren's a 1-2. It was terrific.
That's right. And they should do good in Russia, and so I'll take that too. I'm glad they're branching out. It's not just, Hungary anymore.
That's right. Kudos. All right. Well, that was exciting. So, yeah. Hey, just a quick note for those of you that listen but weren't aware that we also upload these podcasts to YouTube, so you can actually see two talking heads discuss their favorite sport if you're into that kind of thing. So there you have that, and you get to see cool things like this. You know what I'm going to do, Grace? I'm going to show you one of my favorite. And those of you out there that have some cool pictures that you take, share those with us. Like, what's one cool picture that you took somewhere at an F1 race that you really like? Here's one of mine. I'm going to share it. I'm gonna share it, Grace.
Okay.
Do you see that?
I do. Hold on. I got to make my camera bigger or my screen bigger. I just see carpet right now. I assume that's not what I'm supposed to be looking at.
Right. Well, I hope that's showing up on the Zoom.
There we go.
Zoom call there. Yeah.
I can see it now.
This is one of my favorite because you know what this is? This is back in 2016. I was at Finale Mondiale at Ferrari. This is Stefano Lai. He is the man in charge of protecting the Ferrari name globally. He is the head of Ferrari's brand. And first of all, I love his hair because I have the same hairdo.
Similar haircut, right?
I love his red tennis shoes.
His look, you have a very similar look in general.
See? Yeah, he's got the beard going, right? And so anyway, yeah, I was sitting there and chatting with him. I had lunch with him in Italy, and then I get to see him again here. It's just a cool picture that I took a few years ago. I thought I'd share that. So with that, see, that's a good example of why you can watch these on YouTube, and you can see fun stuff like that.
It kind of looks like, at first I thought he was sitting at like a baggage claim, right? Like just leaning on the little luggage carrier, right? Right. I'm just waiting for my luggage here like everybody else has to do after they get off a plane. But
he was waiting for the luggage where he had Maurizio Arriva Bene stuffed in there and his luggage is carry-on.
I just... he's less than 3 ounces of liquid. It's fine.
Yeah.
I just think that would be funny. But no, he surely doesn't fly commercial. But
I doubt it.
I doubt it too, right? Like it's Ferrari, man. You don't fly commercial, but
commercial. Come on, man.
But yeah, that's it's pretty cool. I have to do some digging. I have lots of photos, so
yeah, there's always some fun ones. I've got lots of pictures of cars and F1 cars and all the lots of great pictures that are meaningful to me. But that was just one that I captured while I was sitting there waiting for something to start, and he was sitting there on the phone, and I thought that's a cool picture, so I took that, and so there you go. It's the guy in charge of Ferrari's brand worldwide. They take that very seriously, by the way.
Of course they do, right? Like I think any brand does, but sure does Ferrari.
Yeah.
That's Enzo Ferrari. You can't say that. Yeah.
Right. Oh, yes, I can.
It's a shit box.
And that's my other face with.
This is Enzo Ferrari.
That's right. It's Enzo Ferrari.
I just wanted to make an observational note about the last 3 races before we move on that have nothing to do with the races, except that Pedro de la Rosa is a very, very salty individual, right? Which I feel like we knew that. We've seen him both as a driver and as a commentator. He's very bitter, very salty. But him with Damon Hill, it's like, Damon Hill, this is your younger self. Younger self, this is your older self. Like the two of them together are like the saltiest people. Like,
I know.
I just think like you guys should just like go somewhere and just be grouchy together at a bar about everything,
I know. I like Damon Hill, but man, if that last race, then it was like, dude, all right, pump the brakes a little bit and back off the caffeine, maybe. I think it was when they were talking about, Michael Schumacher and Damon Hill, and then they talked about a comment that Ralph Schumacher made, and I think it was, "How much run in the family?" I'm like, all right, the two of you need to go exactly. I heard that.
Super salty together because I'm pretty sure you're the same person, just 20 years apart. But go spend some time together. And I think that Nico Rosberg should never do the grid walk, even though I realize it's harder because they're not allowed to talk to anybody because of COVID procedures. But still, never. Nico Rosberg that was a terrible grid walk. Never have that happen again. And I think that Jensen Button should always be in the commentator booth with Crofty. Crofty was just so much more like focused. Like he just wasn't like, I'm just filling space with whatever, like it's baseball. Like I'm just filling time with some crap I just thought up, right? Like, I don't know. Jensen just like, can we just have him sit in the booth? He doesn't have to announce every race. I just want him to sit in there with Crofty and just be like, shut up, man. What are you talking about? You're not adding anything to this, right? Whatever that is.
I agree. I thought JB did a great job.
Yeah, as long as they never have JB and Aunt Davidson together.
Oh,
it's
then
fine.
those two go, in fun, they're in jest, but
Isn't
they
it
go
fun?
at it.
I don't think.
Well,
I don't think
maybe
Aunt
not.
sees it that way.
Maybe not. But I thought they did well. And here's a clip of Jensen on the broadcast.
We need to know if you need a front wing. Jensen, tell me if you need a front wing. Roger that.
I love that. So, the related story. So, one of the few complaints I have about our Tesla is it has the tiniest wing mirrors. Like, I don't know how you're supposed to use these mirrors. And I get it. It has, cameras in the car, but I like to look at my mirrors still sometimes. I'm old like that, right?
Yeah.
But they're terrible. They're super tiny. And so I've done that. Like, I don't know. I can't see anything.
Check the car the next time I come fast.
So that's why it's important to bring your spouse, your friends, whoever you spend a lot of time with into this world, because otherwise they won't get any of your jokes when you just yell like, I don't know.
I know.
I can't see.
I know.
Why don't you tell me if somebody's over there?
Yeah, the funny
Mirrors
thing
can't
about
tell me
it
anything.
is that, I've been doing a soundboard for a long time. Some people love it, some people hate it, but it's just kind of how we roll. But I've been doing this soundboard for a long time. And there are so many times I just want that soundboard on my phone just to play a sound in a certain situation really loud, It's
Right.
like, I'll be in work and there's like meeting. I just want to go,
Not good enough, damn it! Not good enough.
It's just, and then, someone will make a decision and I'm like, oh. Yeah, it's just, because it's such an inside thing for longtime listeners that they know when I play a certain, sound, they know what it is and what it means. But anyway.
It's much like having a gallery of Max Verstappen's like, I'm over this face. Like he has the best, like, oh, if you ask me this question one more time, I'm going to punch somebody's face.
Yeah.
He has such like a short, like he doesn't play like Lewis or like they try to, okay, this is a dumb question, but I'm not gonna I'm gonna answer it like it's not a dumb question because that's how this goes. He's just like, what?
Yeah.
Why are you
Like, this
why
is
are
ridiculous.
you wasting my time? Like he does have some great like exacerbated kind of facial expressions that I often see in my mind during meetings.
Yeah, exactly. Oh boy. Are you ready to talk about some F1 news?
Sure, we have. I mean, at least this time we kept it relatively F1.
Well, I know. We're just about to the point where everybody's like, get to the show.
This is the show.
This is the show.
I haven't been on in 3 weeks. I got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, exactly.
Buckle up.
Buckle up. Strap in, because here we go.
Right.
Well, first up, I think it is worth mentioning because this was like the main story that kind of just gelled out there on everybody's website for about 4 days because there was not a lot of news. So this one was just percolating out there until it started to become as pedestrian as the actual event was. Aston Martin has signed its new drivers for 2022. The very first one is Lance Stroll.
I want it now. What's the matter with those twats down there?
Exactly. I am sure no one is stunned that Aston Martin re-signed Lance Stroll. But I am curious if you believe any of this actually came out of Lance's mouth. Are you ready for his quote?
Okay, I'm ready.
He goes on about, it's great to, team up with Seb, and Seb and I, this is great, and Seb and I started this adventure together, and it's going to be really great. And then the final para of his quote was, quote, now, with the prestige and support of Aston Martin and the brilliant new sponsor partners that such a prestigious brand has attracted, we are well positioned to improve our performance in 2022, end quote. There is no way in hell
Prestigious
Lance ever uttered those words.
No.
That just, no. And now I will contrast that as an example of how that didn't come from Lance's mouth. Now, I know the re-signing of Seb. I was looking at social media, and there's a few boo birds out there about Seb being re-signed. They're like, bring in new blood and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting because with such radical regulation changes, who better to have in the seat, right? Go ahead.
Vettel is the only thing that holds this all together. What are you?
I know.
Don't
I
You
know.
can't get rid of that guy.
He's like the Elmer's glue at this point, you know? Lance has never driven an F1 car in anger from a different spec or engine type.
Oh,
But Seb
that's true.
has, right?
That's
So
right.
I think having Seb in the seat will come in handy for sure with all the new regulation changes. Now, I actually do think this came from Seb's mouth. So contrast, if you will, the quotes. Here's what Seb said, quote, "I'm really looking forward to racing the new generation of Formula One cars. Their look is very different, and the new technical regulations should give us cars that can race much more closely than recently. More exciting racing would be great for the drivers as well as the fans. And the changes are so big that every team will be starting from a new beginning. So it'll be a great opportunity for us at Aston Martin. And I believe in the strength of our new growing team. So I'm already looking forward to 2022. That seems like a real quote.
The reason why it doesn't sound like Lance Stroll's quote is really from Lance Stroll is because there's not enough like pauses and and yeah, right.
All the verbal pauses. Yeah, it's true.
Yes. He speaks with a lot of those.
Now, the Prestige and
Prestige. Somebody told him, like, he must have read a presser because I'm sure that
Yeah.
Aston Martin's presser uses the Prestige word a lot, right? Like, I can see like the whole like James Bond and the Prestige of the Aston Martin, right? I can see that that's where he picked that word up. But yeah, do I think that he like natively uses that word? Probably not.
Yeah. I bet this quote is the first time Lance has probably used the word prestige.
Maybe. But again, I think if you put in like some ums and some pauses and some like,
Well, that's true. Yeah, it could
sound,
be from him.
It would sound more like him because he seems to, even though he's been doing that part of this job for quite some time, it still seems to, he's like, I don't know. I haven't memorized enough like generic comebacks yet to really answer your question without 17 verbal pauses. But
well, I did see that Aston Martin is trying to get out ahead of the brand of Lance, and they had this social media post. They're trying to create a kinder, gentler Lance.
Okay.
Did you see the one where he was like interviewed by the little kid, and he was on like a Zoom call with a little kid and his dad, and his little kid was asking him questions, and Lance is coming across as, "Oh, it's old Uncle Lance," and Lance is good with the kids. He's good with the children.
If he was still friends with Mark Webber, because that's still the saltiest question I've ever seen a child ask a grown man.
Yeah. So
no, I haven't. I do watch all of the unboxed videos with both of them together because it's so funny. They're like Vettel tries so hard. I mean, it's just like it was the same thing with him and Kimi, right? Like Vettel's trying so hard to be like personable because that's who Vettel is. Like he's just like extroverting all over the place, and Lance is sort of like, "Okay, we're playing this game because they're making me play it. All right." Like they don't necessarily have chemistry together, but Vettel's trying so hard to just like extrovert him into making this an interesting video. And so I have to watch him because that's the joy.
It's tough when you're trying to work with somebody that's got the personality of a carp. It's hard.
It's the opposite of Carlando, but I love Vettel. I mean, that's been always true. I think his personality has always been great for the sport, even though I haven't always been the biggest fan of him as a race car driver, for sure. But I think his personality has been great. And I think he's growing into the elder statement at like 35 or whatever, right? The elder statement of Formula
Venerable.
One. I think that you would be foolish to give it. I think I could believe that. I like the phrase "boo birds." I don't know if you made that up, but that's my new favorite. No. The boo birds. All right. Well, I could see. So there is a problem, and this is always a problem with Formula One, especially. But you have only 20 seats, and at any given time, there's only like, if you have 5 seats open, that's crazy. That never happens, right? So you're always going to have this push for these like talented drivers coming through F2 that there's no place to put them, and so I could see that somebody's like, "I'm a big fan of this, 18-year-old that's really successful."
Yeah, sure.
You're old, get out of there, right? Like, I guess I could see it from that perspective, but from a like, should Vettel be out of there? That is not valid.
No, because the guy that they're really using for that young driver development is already there. It's Lance. So yeah, I mean,
I just
having Lance there and putting in a person that's never been in F1 in that car with brand new regulations doesn't make any sense to me.
But especially because, like, if that's what we see of Vettel, like in the unboxed videos, could you imagine him at the factory or him at the race? Like, just his like personality is so engaging. That would be so valuable to a team because the driver can really like, pick everybody up. I mean, that's true in any job. We've all been in that place where you're like, oh God, do we have to go to this meeting? And somebody's like, we're going to go in. And, it's like the coach speech, right? Like, and get that. And you're like, you're right. We're going to go and we're going to get this contract. And you're right. And I need to get over myself and let's go. Right. And a driver can really give the team that kind of momentum. And especially when you're at someplace like where Aston Martin is, that is kind of not terrible, but yet not great, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're kind of stuck in that middle, and that has to be the most frustrating place for a team to live,
Yeah, right.
They're just, and even when they were Force India, this has been their story for like 10 years. They just can't seem to like get over the line to be a top team. They just keep being best of the rest. Now they're not even best of the rest, perhaps. And so I think that's, you need the vision, the extrovertedness, of a Vettel, in addition to he can drive the wheels off a car. That brings really boatloads that Lance just doesn't bring to the team. I just don't see him being that kind of a person, like first one in, last one out. Give me a spanner. Let's get this car going. Right. I don't see that happening from Lance.
No, Vettel's like that. I have visions in my mind of Vettel and what he's like at the actual Aston Martin. I think he'd actually end up being like Carl the janitor from Breakfast Club.
Right.
He's going to come in. You think I don't know, but I do, and he reads, I go through your locker, he's all in there with the, cleaning and, that's probably, that's him.
He knows stuff. I mean, haven't we learned that from all of these videos we've watched? He knows stuff.
Right.
So
he learned from Schumacher,
So I think the only valid reason I could see people wanting him to step aside is because they want to bring in some young talent, but your team would make that decision.
No, I don't think so either. All right. Well, breaking news. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Audi to F1 again.
You know what? Formula One did send me a fan survey.
Yeah? They did?
Yes.
Another
I haven't
one?
looked at it yet. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, if Audi is going to Formula One, I really did get... Yesterday, they sent a fan survey. I'm like, oh, this is joy.
I must have missed it. I don't know.
I don't remember how.
Yeah.
Maybe it came from like Autosport or something. I don't remember.
I think it was Motorsport. Motorsport had one going.
Okay.
I
just
went
thought,
over there.
Another fan
because I
survey.
like James Allen. James Allen's a good guy, and he's over there at the helm, and so I go over and help James out. But so anyway, well, no, this is, look, tongue in cheek. It seems every regulation change, there's always these rumors that Audi's coming to F1. Audi's coming to F1. Grace and I have joked about it. We've done posts about it. We've been, making fun of this rumor that's been around for, 15 years at least. But it's actually Audi's parent company that could enter VW, that could enter F1 with an engine supply program, according to Mark Hughes and Scott over at the race. And the article, nice job by the two of them. The article says that in Italy, the teams gathered to discuss the new power unit situation, and it could see another year delay on the new engine, making it, instead of coming out in 2025, it could delay it till 2026 before it's actually introduced to the sport. Now, there was a couple of key points in this that the article made that VW also attended this meeting with the teams as a potential engine supplier, and both VW and Red Bull were against continuing with the MGUH, or as Paul might say, MGUH, right? As it's a very costly part of the current spec of engine. And you have to consider F1's attempt at getting more manufacturers into the sport. So if MGUH is holding VW back, then it may do away with it in order to lure the Germans in, right? And on top of that, which I found interesting, the article does suggest that the teams were entrenched at up until recently, the teams were entrenched in the MGUH technology, but now they may be okay with eliminating it And as the authors point out of the article, they aren't sure what concessions were made to get the teams happy with that decision. And I'd be curious to see what concessions were made too. Having said that, the mind naturally then wanders and it does in the article as well. But you could see where they naturally connect the dots and say, look, Red Bull's in there. They're saying, yeah, we're going to start our own engine program. Let's do away with the MGUH because it's just way too expensive for the gain. And you got VW sitting at the same table saying the same thing. So the mind naturally wonders, well, hey, wait a minute. What about an alliance between Red Bull and VW? They're both of like mind on the MGUH, and Red Bull's got that new engine department, and VW's ability to enter and cast some of that engine design cost off on their partner a little bit in a joint effort to come in and dominate the sport. And I got to think that if that works financially, there may be an appeal in that for VW and Red Bull. And Red Bull might like to have an instant engine genius on their program, as well as all the manufacturing prowess that comes with the German engineering icon that is VW. So I'm thinking, the article said it wasn't, and I'm not putting words in their mouth. I'm not suggesting they said there was a done deal or anything. I'm just saying you could see where you connect those dots because both of them aren't up for the MGUH. Both of them, VW coming in as an possible engine manufacturer supply program. They need a team with cars, and just so happens Red Bull is a team with cars, and they just started a engine department. And gosh, wouldn't it be good for Red Bull if we could bring in some of that VW genius and we could manufacture them, develop here, and we could cover a lot of the costs, all that. It does seem like a logical sort of marriage of two like-minded individuals.
I love the sentence that is, we're going to cast off some of our engine design costs with our partner in a joint effort. That doesn't sound like a joint effort. That sounds like, well, you were already cooking dinner every night, so I'm just going to keep letting you do that, right? Like, I don't,
right.
That's not a partnership, but all right, I'll let that go.
Right.
But anyway, I don't know. I mean, of course, and some of it is from our desire of wanting another team and another manufacturer and something interesting to happen on that front. So that's why that's always the name that comes up, because there's only so many groups out there that would ever get involved in something like this. Most of them are already in the sport or in something like sports cars or something, similar. So I think that, to get the Volkswagen Group into Formula One we've been talking about for years. So it's on Facebook. It's on F1's Facebook page. That's where I saw it. Oh. And it is with Motorsport. Sorry.
It's Motorsport's fan survey. Yep.
Yeah.
I took it.
Well, I haven't taken it yet, so I can't mock their questions. But anyway, that's where I saw it.
I think I discussed that, and I even reference you whenever it comes to surveys because, that is what you do.
That is my job.
And I always say that, Grace always says that before you ask a question, know why you want to ask that question and what data that question is going to give you that applies to what thing you're trying to impact, right?
All these years,
I know, I've picked it up. I've learned that from you, so I totally get it. And a lot of those questions, sometimes when I read those surveys, I kind of feel like they're just kind of asking, this would be nice to knows.
Right.
Well, there's a lot of nice to knows, but if that isn't an actionable metric that you
then
need,
don't ask it.
Then don't ask it, right?
Right.
And the other lesson that you taught me over all these years was that don't do a survey, and whatever you do not do a survey and ask people to answer the survey and do nothing.
Right. That's the worst, right? Because then people will never give you answers again, right?
Yeah, right.
We all feel that at work, right?
Right. So if you're going to do a survey, then you had better be prepared to do something. Because the expectation is from fans who take the time to answer, the expectation is that this would all be aggregated into some actionable steps.
Yes. If you're going to ask me, I don't know if this question's on there, but if you're like, sprint races, would you like to see more sprint races or whatever they're supposed to call them, right? Sprint races. If you get 90% of people tell you, no, they're a terrible idea, don't do them, and you keep doing them, well, then people are going to stop answering your question because obviously it has nothing to do with the outcome. And we've all been there. Like, nothing's worse than when your boss or somebody in management says to you, hey, I want you guys to spend time and think about how we're going to do this project. And then you get there and they go, that's nice, but we're actually going to do this, this, and this. Well, you, right? Why did you make me waste all my
Why am
life?
I
If
doing
you
this?
already
Yeah.
knew what you wanted, why didn't you just tell me, here's what we're doing, just go execute that. Save us all the
Right.
trouble, right? Like,
Right.
I've been doing this long enough. I know that happens, and it happens to all of us. So just, if you're just going to do it, just do it. Don't ask my opinion. But
Right.
I think the other lesson I always try to impart was that, Flip would read something when we first started dating, and he'd go, oh, I read this thing and I saw that. I would always go, what was the source? And so the first time he started then telling me, I read this thing, oh, and their data was from whatever source, I was like, and I've done my job here. Like, if we never get married, it's all right. My work here is done. At least one
There you
more
go.
person understands that you always have to go and look at what the sources of the data that they're
Right.
citing, because
Right.
anybody can throw some percentages out there, right? Like, that's great. That doesn't take any skill. So
Right.
what's your source was always my follow-up question for a long time. And then he just started answering like he looked it up, because often
Well,
articles don't tell you. That's the other
yeah.
thing too, right? They
Right,
just present it
right,
as
right.
facts, and then they don't
Right.
tell you where it came
They
from.
don't tell you where it came from. Right. Right.
So,
Well, in this
I-
case, I'm glad I did source the race on this one.
Yes.
And Mark
Although-
and Scott over there.
And they do. And the race has some good stuff. And
Yeah.
check
good
it out, right?
Good peeps. Yeah.
I'm a big fan of their MotoGP podcast. So they got Toby Moody. It's good stuff.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, sure. Yeah. No, and Ed Straw and those guys,
Yeah, I like
they're all pedaling away and doing a nice job of it. So,
And they made a 10-minute
No beef.
video out of Marzipan and Schumacher not liking each other. That alone, I was
Yeah.
impressed, because like,
yeah.
really, when they asked Mick Schumacher, and his first response was, well, he's my teammate. I don't know that you needed. How did you make that into 10 minutes? I was very impressed. They
Yeah,
did.
right. Yeah.
They did.
Yeah.
That kudos. I would have just, I don't have that. I'm not a very good content creator, apparently.
Right.
I don't know how to stretch what is obvious to all of us
Right.
into a
right.
10-minute video about why they don't like each other. Yeah.
Stretch. Let's see what else in the news. Well, hey, look, the Max versus Lewis, that debate. Woo!
Get in there, Lewis.
That continues, folks. Lots of white noise out there still wafting about like a bad dog fart that won't vent out of the room.
There are no good dog farts, first of
No,
all.
there's not. No. No, but this
They're
one's
all bad.
this one's becoming a particularly bad dog fart. Yeah, and won't. But some articles say that the two will still clash this season, and I believe that because look, they aren't running for Mr. Congeniality here. They're running for the World Championship, and neither are prepared to lift in a lot of situations. This notion of possibly clashing again has prompted fans, those comfortably wedged into their lazy boy loungers, to suggest that Max is stupid and needs to think long term, and Lewis has nothing to lose, so he can get punchy, etc. And the overall notion is that Lewis is trying to win the title, and Max was just trying to win the Italian Grand Prix, right?
No, this is Max's best shot. This is Red Bull's literal best shot
Yeah.
at winning a championship.
Yeah.
That premise doesn't even make sense. Like,
Yeah.
Lewis, I mean, granted, we do have a big rule change, so who knows what, and I think
Yeah.
this season we have seen some chinks in the armor of Merc over there. But like to think that Max is just like short term in it is not what's happening there.
No, he's
thinking
trying to win a
long-term.
championship
Yeah,
too.
absolutely.
Yeah. And we've talked about this in the past too. And I know Paul and I, it's different. It's hard to win titles when you're defending a points lead. And Jenson Button knows that all too well from 2009. Lewis Hamilton knows that, firsthand. So that's difficult, but that's not how Max really races. And I think we've seen enough of Max to know that that's not something that he dwells on. It's like, oh my gosh, protect my points. It's just not in his nature. No, will it be? Will he lift to fight another day and lift off the throttle? I don't know. Maybe. Will Lewis? Maybe. I don't know. It's hard to know. Some people suggested, well, look, that 3-place grid penalty, that was the right thing to do. It was if you had to apportion blame, you'd give it to Max. And that 3-place grid penalty, that's there to sort of calm things down. And I guess I'm just wondering, do all of you think that that's going to reduce the likelihood that the two will clash again? Was the
No.
punitive action by the FIA stewards to correct the behavior? Do you think that's going to correct the behavior? You
So
say
here-
no.
So here's what I think. So I agree that it's not it wasn't that Max was wrong, so they gave him a 3 penalty. grid position. That's not why they did that. I think I think it's easier to see in stick and ball sports because refereeing is much more instantaneous than it is in racing. And I watch basketball, so I often use that as my analogy. But basketball, if you have players that get a little chippy and are a little too in each other, pushing each other, talking back to the refs, they'll get a technical. And if you just look at it in that moment, you're like, well, what did he do? He didn't do anything. No, right? Because the course of the game. And so the refs sometimes will be a little tougher in the beginning because they're trying to set the tone for the rest of the game. And the refs don't want to be the decider, right? I don't want to be the one that decides the outcome of this game, but you all need to bring it down a notch or this game's just going to be all technicals and nobody's going to enjoy that. So I think that this is that same kind of thing. So it's not so much that Max was wrong and therefore he got penalized. It is to all right, everybody, take a deep breath. I have to do something because I can't just let you all live this life, but it's not going to stop them either. Not any more than it stops basketball players. Of course, they're still chippy. They still get in each other's faces, but then it gives the refs the ability to go, I warned you. It's kind of like going off the track. I warned you. Now you have to take the longest lap, right?
Right.
I told you, if you keep this up, this is what's going to happen. And it's a way to kind of control the flow of the game or the race. And so I didn't find it, surprising that that's what happened, but I also don't think that means that it wasn't a racing incident, which is how I saw it. But
yeah, for sure.
I think they had to do something. You can't just let this it'll become a demolition derby out there. We can't let that happen either.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that three place, if that's going to give Max reason to pause. From
no, Max doesn't pause for anything.
But I don't think he does either. I just don't think it's in his nature. It's interesting comments from Alex Wirtz, your friend and mine, Alex Wirtz. Yeah. He's the president of the GPDA, the Grand Prix Drivers Association, and so he says, look, he thinks this still clash again. And I'm paraphrasing here. This isn't exactly what Alex said, but he's basically iterating that what we're actually seeing is two guys marking their territory, and neither are going to back off. And he says that he thought Silverstone and Monza were both racing incidents. And in a lot of ways, I look at it and think, we're seeing the older generation on 7 titles, trying to eke out the 8th, and we're seeing the younger generation. It's not just Max. It's Lando, it's Charles Leclerc, it's Pierre Gasly, it's Albon, it's, all these young guys that are coming up, Carlos Sainz and Lando, did I say Lando Norris? I think it did. George Russell. It's all these young guys coming up. And so every champion, experiences these moments when things turn. And so I think we're seeing that battle.
Yeah. And we haven't seen it from Lewis because he's been so dominant.
Well, he's had the
car.
For years, yes,
right.
He's had the car, yes, for sure.
And so,
and for years though, he was the young guy, toppling the giants, right? Yep. And that's why he has such a great following, and people love him, and of course they do. And what he's achieved is amazing. And that's why, because he was always the young upstart coming in, taking on Fernando his first year, taking on Kimi Räikkönen, and then winning the titles. And, there's a lot to love about that. And what you're actually seeing is now Max coming in, or Lando, or it could be any one of them, depending on car. It could be any one of those guys. And you know what? Before you assume that everybody in the world's a Lewis Hamilton fan, not all are. You have a tremendous amount of very young fans out there that are Lando fans, that are Charles Leclerc fans or Pierre Gasly, and they're waiting for their guys to come up. To them, Lewis is the old guy, right? Hard to imagine because Lewis is a young man, I
mean, Alonso is, young racing driver Fernando Alonso. So I don't know.
Yeah. And it just, Max is still one of them because he just, he joined when he was the plucky teen, Max Verstappen, right?
That's right.
So anyway, speaking of plucky teens, the next thing I thought we'd talk about is the Netflix documentary called Schumacher. And I managed to watch it as I was a fan and am a fan of the 7-time world champion, the German, as evidenced by this. And those of you watching YouTube, you can see that. That is a original piece of Michael Schumacher there in a Ferrari. So, yes, I was a fan of Michael, still am. I was hoping, and we had a great question. And I'm so sorry, I can't remember who asked it on the mailbag. Was asking what our expectations of the documentary were. And I was hoping that it would go a long way in actually humanizing Michael Schumacher after decades of the press and fans dehumanizing him. And I am happy to say that I think it did achieve that at some level. I thought it made him back into a man and not a villain. I thought it did a good job of that. It's a fiercely personal thing for me because I've walked in very similar shoes as Mick with my own father, who had a brain aneurysm twice. And I think the most emotional part for me was when Mick said that he would give it all up just to talk racing with his dad again. And I literally have been there. I've said that 1,000 times about my father, who's no longer here. So I know exactly what Mick is facing. And I can easily say that to this day. Same thing. I would give up I would give all of this up if I could just sit and talk racing and watch racing with my dad again, like I used to. So I know that feeling. I know where he's at. And in my view, and then I want to get your thoughts on it because I know you and Flip watch it, but in my view, I felt like this ultimately was a love story. It was a love story about Michael's love of racing, his love for his wife and family and his children, his love of life. And I felt like that's kind of what it was. It was a tribute to the person that was Michael. It wasn't an exhaustive deep dive into the stats, a race-by-race account, or a year-by-year account of each championship and what he went through. It was really a story about Michael, the man, what he achieved, and all the things that he cherished and loved. And it almost, in some ways, was a love note from his wife, in a way, to him, And I kind of felt that was very special from Karina. To take the time to sit down, discuss some hard things, and Mick and Gina Marie and talk about some things that are very personal to them and what they're going through. And that's not easy because, they've been very protective of Michael. And Karina's point is he protected us, his whole career. And so now we're going to protect him. And I thought that was really neat. Many folks speak about the pro-Senna battle, and it was similar, I would say, maybe not in scope or anything, but it was similar to Michael's battle with Mika Hakkinen. Yeah. I thought those were great battles. But just like Fernando Alonso, who entered the sport and started taking on Schumacher, Michael entered the sport and took on Senna. And Senna knew it. Yeah. Senna knew he was being beaten. He knew the young gun was coming. The young lion was on the safari plains, and he knew he was there. And he knew that he was driving in a whole different game, and he felt the pressure. And a lot of people that I've talked to felt like that's what led to the crash in '94, trying to stay ahead of Schumacher. Yeah. And I just alluded to it earlier, we're seeing that again with Max and Lewis. It happens to all champions. Eventually, someone comes along to take your crown, and it happened with Schumacher. We're seeing it happen now. But I thought the documentary discussed Michael's life in general, but doesn't, like I mentioned, dive into the deep details. And to be honest, I could have watched another hour of a documentary that just focused on his racing, the races he'd won, the astounding fashion that he's worn over the years.
I know there was not enough of that.
I know. There wasn't enough fashion because originally our fashion award was the Michael Schumacher Fashion Award. But the milestones that he achieved, that was all good. But it wasn't that kind of documentary. But to me, that just means, hey, there's room for another deep dive into what make Michael so special. But you and Flip watch it. What did you guys think of it?
So I think... So first of all, I thought it was interesting because it's very front loaded. Like you get to Suzuka 2000 and there's like 20 minutes left. Yeah. Like I'm like, what are we going to just yada, yada, yada through a couple championships here? And that's what they do. It's just like, and it's 04, right? And then it's a ski slope. And it's like, they just that, because what I wanted to see was how they were going to play the whole, I retired, fired from Ferrari, and then came back to Mercedes and didn't really perform as well and struggled. And they just like yada yada over all of that. He basically like, I retired, I jumped out of a plane, just kidding, now I'm back. And then it was like, that was it, right? They barely talked about that because it was very front loaded. Like you really got like, we were like at the 20-minute mark and I was like, we're only at Suzuka, man. We got a lot to go. This is when we were talking about it, I was like, well, I guess I was expecting it to, because I had seen your comment, right? Like you had said that, somebody else had said that, oh, it's just like very surface level of sort of like Michael's life.
Right.
And so I was kind of like, oh, well, maybe this is just for the fans and for us to enjoy. We already know all these details. What it really reminded me of at the end was it would have been the eulogy somebody would have given at a wake. It's just his friends. It's people who knew him telling stories, which is what happened, except somebody organized the stories on a timeline.
Yeah.
Whereas normally you would just have, Flavio would tell the story and Jean would go, oh, you're right, Flavio. I remember that. You remember this time he did that? And Ross Farmer would go, oh my God, let me tell you this Michael story. And then David Coulthard would go, oh my God, he was a terrible singer. Can you believe that? So it just was kind of like somebody organized those kind of stories. And then that's why you don't need any of that detail. Because if you were at somebody's wake, you wouldn't need those details. We all know those storylines.
Right.
We all know that depth. So it's really about celebrating him as this multidimensional person. Because I kept saying that too, is that I think, and unfortunately my comparison is also to how Kobe Bryant was always portrayed, who's now also tragically, Michael's not dead yet, but so I think that people really thought, Kobe was a real jerk face. And then when he retired, we saw that he wasn't a jerk face. That was really his game face, right? And Michael was very much the same way. Like his game face was very different, and who he was on the track was very different than who he was in private. But we don't ever see that. And so it's hard to relate to that. So I think it was really trying to humanize him. But to me, it felt very kind of cathartic as a fan, and as somebody that has a relationship with somebody, but I don't have a relationship with them, right? Like not as a real person, but of course, 2000s, that's him and Mika's when I started watching, all these sort of, things. But I just really, I thought that then they didn't have to get into any of those details. We know what happened at Ferrari. We know what happened at Mercedes. We know what happened on the ski slope. You don't need to tell us those things. You can just kind of like highlight it. And what we really just want to do is tell these human stories about him, because that's what people do. And it is the weirdest isn't the right word. I don't know. But, I've had family members that have had Alzheimer's, and, that's that same sort of like, they're here, but they're not here kind of like, and so it is kind of hard. How do you process that as a living person still dealing with this person who isn't that same person?
Exactly.
And so I think it's a way of trying to say that, yes, Michael's still alive, but he's not the same. And how do we process that? And because he's famous and he's a part of so many of our lives, they were able to bring this together. But once we watched, I was like, this isn't a documentary. It's more like a eulogy at a wake. And it was just like people telling these great stories that, and seeing footage that, some of that footage I've never seen, but, and seeing it all together. And it was just, and the behind the scenes and, and just the way it was, like something that Flip noted, like they talk about how they have the karaoke moment with him and David Coulthard and they're really friends. And then the Spa 98, like, well, that was done very purposely to show you that like, well, David wasn't a jerk. He wasn't brake checking him, even though that's the narrative that gets carried. And that was the narrative that got carried afterwards. And so they were trying to play that, like, you're angry in that moment. And then, you go back to singing terrible karaoke together because that's the only song he knows all the words to. Right.
Right.
And that's, I don't know. It just really felt more like that than a documentary. I don't know if somebody said to me, what was Michael Schumacher like? That's not what I would recommend to them to watch. I think that's somebody who knows Michael Schumacher, who's lived watching him race. That's something you watch. It's a very personal kind of watching rather than, a documentary.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Grace, because it is, because I watched his whole career, and so I already know a lot of the intimate details around the race and what he achieved. So this was sort of that. I think it's a great point. And it is right. I think, when my dad had his first aneurysm, I was a teenager. I was like, close to mix age. And we would say that, he kind of really, then, he lived several years after that, and he died, back, 2006-ish. And so anyway, you would, we'd say that he really passed away twice. You know what I mean? The first time, not the same guy at all. There was, speech and all the things that had to be regained. And now over time, some of that all sort of came back. I don't know that it is with Michael. And something was nagging on me when I got done with it. I wonder what his health is, at this point, because you pointed out it's almost like a eulogy, and I'm curious, and it's none of my business, and nor should anyone know. That's something for the family to know, and not. But I just wonder, So anyway, but it's a great point, and it does feel like people that knew Michael remembering Michael, in that way. And I think James Allen did a great job. He did a majority of the heavy lifting on the VO. Yeah. But he did it in a way, and I sent him a message and told him this. He did it in a way that it was real prose,
That's great.
He had to get that. He could have just read a script and, Michael did, and it's not what he did. He really kind of channeled that nuance and elegance that kind of documentary needs. And so kudos to James. I thought he did a great job.
I thought it was I was thinking the same thing. And I think in some way, well, it is what you're a writer for a living, right? You should be good with it. But I think it was a different kind of writing, right? Like it's like technical writing versus like fiction, right? So I think it was very proseful. It was very, different than just I went to the race and I'm just reporting these things that happened in the race, right? So I did think he did a great job of carrying that narrative and being the like glue between events. But I think that we the whole Albon's cat came up because I have no memory for that kind of stuff, right? Like I don't know who won Monza in 1974. I don't even know if they were at Monza in 1974. That is not where my memory lies. But those are the memories those are the events I know, right? Like it was like, so it never could have been that way because those are the 5 big points, you have Senna dying, Damon Hill winning the championship, Jack Villeneuve, right? Japan in 2000, him, going to spend more time with the grandkids after leaving Ferrari and then coming back to Mercedes, these are the things I would have storyboarded. So then there wasn't a lot of depth, right? Right. Oh, I forgot Spa 98 was in there too, right? Like, so if they're the things, and then braking is like at Silverstone, right? Like if these are the events that I know about, then it's not a documentary because I have a terrible memory for those kind of things. But those are like the 6 events that I would have put on the storyboard that would have had to have been in there. So, but it was lovely. It was very nice. I liked watching it. I thought it was, I thought they did a good job of trying to balance the because they didn't get into the really Schumacher-y way he can be like Rascast. Like they didn't get into that kind of that side of Schumacher. They did kind of hint at it. Did he drive into Damon? Did he? They kind of talked about it, but then it was kind of not really. So that was all the more reason. It wasn't like fake positive, but they did not get into some of the criticisms or some of the reasons that rules are rewritten because of things he's done. So that's why it just really felt like we're going to get these, the 5 closest people to him, and we're just going to tell stories and we're going to put it on a videotape, and then we can all watch it and enjoy that time. Yeah, it was great. Yeah. So if you haven't seen it, watch it. I recommend it for sure. And you get to see Spa 98. So yes, you do. You can see why that's always on the bingo card. Keep in mind, they didn't really explain this, but when he came up behind and hit David Coulthard, David was a lap down. It wasn't like that was for the lead. They did not mention that.
No, no. Michael was walking away with this win, and he comes up in McLaren, and David, could hassle him and try to slow him down or whatever. That was the implication at the time, anyway.
Yeah.
And that he brake checked and hit and Ross Braun said in the documentary, he hit the brakes, and you don't do that.
No, that's right.
Yeah,
and like David's defense was, well, you ran into me. Like,
yeah, right. That was
some
good.
some things never change, but
Right.
yeah.
All right.
It was good.
All right. In other news, let's go down some of the headlines real quick. Let's see. Hey, Danny Rick is going to get to drive the 1984 Monte Carlo NASCAR of Dale Earnhardt Sr. So that's very cool.
It is pretty cool.
And you may be wondering, well, how is that possible? Well, that's possible because his boss, Zach, owns the damn car.
Yes.
Who knew?
I didn't know that. I thought that was
I
pretty
didn't
great.
know that either. Zach Brown. You crazy man! He owns NASCAR cars. It's crazy.
Can I also share a random Zach Brown story?
Yeah.
Flip curates a lot of things off of YouTube for me, but he found apparently Zach Brown was on the Wheel of Fortune. When
I
he was
saw
like
that.
8. Did you see this?
Yeah, I've seen that.
And it's hilarious because he has a very distinct speech pattern. Like
He
even as
does.
an American, it's not like like Nikki Hayden was from the like, oh, he's from Kentucky. That's what people from Kentucky sound like, Nikki Hayden, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not just that he's like from someplace. He has a very distinct kind of
He
speech pattern to him.
does.
So
He
to see
does.
like 12-year-old Zach Brown still speaking like that, like, I mean, of course he does, but it was just really funny that it was like, yes, that is definitely Zach Brown because that is exactly what he sounds like now,
Yeah.
and that is exactly what he sounded like at 12 or whatever when he was on Wheel
It
of
is
Fortune.
funny because I always think about when they interview him. He's like, "Well, Lando's done a really good job." He's like and so when I always think when British people must hear him over there, he's like, "Oh, that's what all Americans sound like." We really don't. That's actually very unique speech pattern that Zach has. It's not your atypical American accent.
Although I did often joke about that with MotoGP because it was like all the because there for a while in MotoGP in the early 2000s there were like 5 Americans, but they were all like from Texas or Kentucky or like they all had this like Southern accent to it. I'm like, well, all right. We don't all sound like Nikki Hayden, but it's a big country. But I just thought that was so great. So if you haven't seen it, go find it.
Yeah.
And you too will be like, well, yeah, that's what he's always sounded
That's what
like.
he sounds like. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah.
I think everybody in the rest of the world thinks all Americans sound like Jerry Clower,
Yeah, well, I don't know.
No, we don't. Let's see. Next.
This is, you know what? You should put this on the top. I'd have to find it. It was from qualifying. It was whatever race Jensen Button was on. Because then Latifi was in 5th, and he sounds like an old British lady. He's like, "Whoa, Latifi's in 5th." We laughed so hard. We still laugh about that. Like, "Whoa, Latifi's in 5th." It was just like Jensen Button's voice went up like 7 octaves during qualifying. It was
funny.
great. Yeah. So anyway, that made us laugh too.
JB.
That's
Hey,
right.
by the way, Grace, Kimi Räikkönen, he's good. He had COVID, and he's perfectly fine, and he's ready to drive in Sochi, so that's all good.
So when I heard this story, it wouldn't have surprised. So we saw the thing, where they had to name all their World Driver Championships backwards, right? And Kimi gets like, halfway, like into 5 or 6, and he goes, "When does this end?" And they're like, "When you get one wrong." And he's like, "I didn't know that. I would have gotten the first one wrong."
The
if you
first
told me
one
that,
wrong.
right? So if you apply that, Kimi, to this, I just expected you to have COVID for the rest of the season.
Yeah, right,
No.
right.
I can't taste anything. I don't feel well. I can't come back.
Can't smell
right?
anything. It can't come back.
Like, the only thing I need to get out of this is COVID. I'm good. I won't be in those last races.
He'd be calling his doctor. Give me a doctor's excuse.
Right.
Yeah.
Let Kubica do it. I've got COVID. So I was surprised more that he came back. I thought he would just be like, "No, I'm still sick. I can't come back."
I know. Yeah, exactly. Let's see. In other news, I was reading some article. Let's see. Toto was talking about getting George Russell in the team and kind of getting him all brought up to speed on the program, and so he can understand and respect the team dynamic and all that. And someone had a great meme. I don't know who did it. I just saw it in passing, and it was a great meme. It was a picture of George Russell, and then a sort of superimposed half George Russell, half Valtteri Bottas, and then the last picture is Valtteri Bottas, and it shows the evolution of George into Mercedes, and it was great, and it was a great job, whoever did that. Well
Wow.
played. And so then I was reading these articles, and it's like, yeah, he's going to, they want to avoid any Nico Rosberg, Lewis Hamilton clash. And George, if you're listening, and I know you do, ignore it. Ignore every single word. You go in there and own that team, Tiger. This is your moment. You're not going to have other moments like this to drive for a top team. Going in there and playing wet nurse to Lewis Hamilton, that may be what the team may sort of hint, nod, nod, wink, wink, but you are not there to do that. You are there to win championships and go do it. So ignore it all, because I have news for you. That is exactly what Lewis Hamilton did. And that's why he's a champion.
I think it was at Sandford was when Button was there, but so they had Button and Nico Rosberg were talking about being teammates with Lewis Hamilton, and they both talked about how it was important to them to be equals. Like that was something they said at the team, like, because Jensen Button was like, if I'm not an equal, then I'm out. Like this isn't worth my time. So I can't imagine that George Russell was just like, yeah, I'll be his Rubens Barrichello. I'm fine with that. That's not going to fly either. So, maybe the first year there'll be some of that, but I don't think that's going to there's no way that's going to stick. I just think that Toto Wolff he's terrible at this. Christian Horner is a master at this. Toto Wolff is terrible at this, right? Yeah.
Well, somebody asked me what I thought about Bottas going to Alfa Romeo, and I think it's a great thing for Alfa Romeo, but it's more important for Valtteri Bottas, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Because look, here's the deal. I like Rubens Barrichello a lot, but he is now a verb. You got Barrichello'd, right?
Correct, right.
You don't want to be that person, right?
No, you don't.
And you got Bottas, And so I look at his Alpha as a way to redeem that and get out of that role as being just Lewis's wingman and being another Barrichello. And I guarantee you, George doesn't have any interest in being that guy.
No, but let's just hope Bottas has a better chance than
than
Braun GP worked out for Rubens Barrichello.
Yeah, and exactly right, because he went over to Braun and it didn't pay out for him. And I think Valtteri's realistic. He knows they're not going to be fighting for wins, but I think he feels like it's a program that he can be helpful and instrumental in and move them forward and grow. And I hope that's right. That's right.
I do too.
But he's got to. It's not. For me, it's redemption. I mean, Valtteri's got to go in there, put in some great performances in a midfield car and drag that team up. And then all of a sudden you're thinking, all right, so he was a wingman. But when he got over to Alpha, man, he really made an impact on that team, And so that's my thought anyway. Let's see. What else? Oh, hey, good news is Lewis is apparently, his neck wasn't too sore because he showed up just a few hours after the Italian Grand Prix in New York at the Met Gala, at the $30,000 per seat event at the Met Gala. Lewis bought an entire table, so he was kicking it, Grace. He was ready to party. He was promoting, I think, some designers that he was promoting, and he bought the table, and they all sat there, and everybody was sending me pictures of the outfit he was wearing, where he looked like he got the napkin snagged in his coat, and it was hanging down his left leg there. Someone said it looked like he had sewn on his grandmother's curtains onto his left leg. But I thought that was funny. So good news is he doesn't seem to be that hurt. That's good.
Right.
And this just in. Yeah. This is Paul's kind of music here, That's Paul's kind of music. So here we go. Right. The Miami International Autodrome. Did you get that? It's the lot? Miami International Autodrome. It's a parking lot. It's like the International House of Pancakes. The Miami International. Well, I'm going to fix it right up front. It's the Miami Gardens International Autodrome.
It doesn't take. I mean, you've flown to airports. I'm sure that you're like, this airport has 6 gates, and yet it's international. What is the standard to become an international airport? I'm sure it's they have international people that live there. It's international.
That's right. It's Cowtongue, Iowa's international airport.
Exactly. So it's just like I've definitely been to places like Wow. Well, all right. It's international.
Yeah. Well, it's the Miami International Autodrome.
All right.
That's the name of the new temporary circuit to be built in the parking lot of the Hard Rock Stadium in Miami Gardens. In Miami Gardens. And for what I'm calling the Miami Gardens Grand Prix. And so now the managing director of the new course is a guy named Tom Garfinkel. And he says that an American driver isn't needed in order to make the race a success. And I saw this quote by Dieter Rinken over at Keith's home, over at Race Fans. Keith and Dieter, good peeps. And the quote that Dieter had from Tom Garfinkel is, quote, "The popularity of the sport is growing a lot in the United States right now without an American driver. I think having an American driver would be a great thing. I don't know that it's a necessary element, but it would definitely be a great thing to see an American driver come into the series." He talked about the Netflix series Drive to Survive as how the sport's connecting with more people in America. And he said, quote, "It's definitely increased the fan support and interest, especially anecdotally among teenagers."
The two that he knows.
Hello, hip kids. Yes. So, yes, amongst teenagers. Well, remember, I said Lando, Charles, Pierre, they've got a phalanx of young teenage fans. They love these drivers and they're wanting to see them excel, right? So I think Tom Garfinkel is on to something here. So he says, "I see it with my sons and their friends. That series is something that they watch with anticipation and excitement, and it's gotten them excited about watching the races and getting to know the drivers and getting simulators and driving themselves. So I think that the series has really increased fan support in the U.S. a lot. The television ratings in the United States are up, I think, over 50% on the races right now. The more that American companies, American fans get involved, the better it is for everyone." He says, let's see, Dieter says that he thinks that Garfinkel expects interest in F1 will continue to rise steadily. Garfinkel said, quote, "It doesn't happen overnight. The Netflix series having another race in the United States, in addition to Austin and Miami, I think it's going to help. The more people get it, get educated, Grace. Get educated.
Wait,
read a book.
Are they getting that education from Drive to Survive? Because that is not a good place
That's
to be getting
scary,
that education,
actually.
right?
Yeah, and that's not a great F1 education. It's a great scene, and it's great drama, and it's great entertainment, but not necessarily a hardcore education. On
Not really
but
truth.
anyway, yeah, right. But anyway, get educated, Grace. Read a book about the sport. The more you fall in love with it, it's not the kind of sport that you just turn on the TV and all of a sudden you're watching a race and you understand what's going on.
I mean, that's not true of any sport. I mean, I guess there's like
you kind of understand there's a race and someone's trying to win it.
Well, right, but in the same way that like that's an end zone and that's an end zone,
Yeah,
and these
yeah,
guys are trying to get
right.
to that end zone,
Right,
right? That's
right,
not really
right.
like understanding the sport. That is like a one sentence description of football.
It's so
these
true.
guys are trying to get to that end.
It's so true. You put on like a cricket match, I have no idea what's going on. I don't understand what the sticks are.
Cricket is not a fair example. Nobody knows what's going on.
I don't
in
understand.
cricket.
And they throw this thing, the ball, and you hit it, and then in America you run bases, but I don't know what the hell they're doing. What do they just run down and run back, or and then you throw it and it knocks a stick and like something that looks like Stonehenge and it falls off the. I don't know what's going on.
Nobody knows. Yeah.
And I apologize. Look, I'm a Yankee. I don't get it. Right. So there you go. But I do understand baseball and football. So anyway, yes, he's right. You just don't turn on F1 and instantly know, right?
But I don't know that. I mean, because again, you can turn on a basketball game or a football game or a baseball game, and you can understand that. Oh, they got to run around the bases. That's what baseball is. And if that guy catches the ball, he's out, right? Like, but that doesn't give you the like. Why does everybody hate the Yankees? Or what's the deal with the Mets? Or what? Like that doesn't give you any of the like. The Drive to Survive kind of stuff that is what makes the sport stick beyond just like I went to a baseball game and drank some beers with my friends, right? How do you create an actual fan out of it is that you have to learn all these kind of like
this is why Belichick deflates the balls. This is what that kind of stuff.
Because your boos make him stronger.
That's right, you boo birds.
Yes, as long as he doesn't wear sleeves, right? Like the sleeves are a weakness, right?
Right.
He rips those right off. And
Right.
that's how you know it's cold, when Belichick starts wearing sleeves.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like January,
That's
and he
right.
breaks out still the overshirt has the ripped off sleeves. It's
Yes.
just the undershirt is now like a sweatshirt. But
Yeah.
I digress. But you know what I mean? But that's like some part of it. And that's where you ask those kind of questions, which I think the Patriots are a good example. Like, why does everybody hate the Patriots? Right? Well, there's some depth there, right? Why does everybody hate the Patriots? But
Well, I think he's right.
what
I
makes the
think
sport.
F1's doing a good job of growing. I think Netflix Drive to Survive is a great series. I've talked to a lot of people that are into the sport now that hadn't been,
Yes.
but they watched that series. So this takes me back, and I've said this 1,000 times. And how do I know that? Because we've done over 750 podcasts,
A million of
folks.
these.
And so I've said it many, many, many times in the past. I watched F1 when I was a little boy, and I fell in love instantly with the cars and the speed and the drama and Monaco and all that good stuff.
Right.
But I really didn't become a diehard F1 fan until I understood what was going on in the paddock.
Right.
And I understood the politics, the people, the personalities, the money that was behind it, the technology that was behind it, the power platers, the Bernie Ecclestons, the Max Mosleys, once you start to get steep, and that is exactly what Drive to Survive brings you. It takes you behind into the paddock where we never get to see. It's like the Holy of Holies, right? And we don't ever get to see that, but now we do. And we get to see Gunther F-bombing everybody. And that's great because it gets you emotionally invested in the series. And once you're emotionally invested in the series, then you're hooked.
Yeah, I just wish Drive to Survive was like I'm all for a little poetic license. I just
There's
think
a lot of poetic license. with
it's
that,
a little
yeah.
it's a little
There is. But having said that, you get emotionally attached to the sport that way.
Sure.
And then it starts to make sense.
It's why 30 for 30s are such interesting. It's been such for ESPN, right? So I of course, I have a friend that's gone to see, Rush, and we went to see, Ford versus Ferrari together. And she's like, I love watching sports movies, but I hate watching sports. Right. Because sports movies only give you the things that matter. You don't have to sit through like 17 crappy football games. You just watch the Super Bowl, right? Like, because the movie just caters you to what you need to know why this was successful. You don't have to watch all the, the boring stuff in between. So I get that. I get the idea of that. I just think, and especially because Drive to Survive is really in the interpersonalness of people. So I don't know. I guess I just always think of George Russell, like, do you watch this? What do you think about it? And he's just like, these are real people to me. Right. At some point, this is his life. These are real people to him. He doesn't, it's not necessarily an accurate reflection, but it is great drama. It is great fun to watch. I still watch it. As I'm sitting here telling you these criticism, I watch it. We make jokes about it. And I'm like, is that the same Baku that you watched? I don't remember it being that interesting, but it apparently was. We just weren't watching the right thing, or, because the team's not with the Netflix crew, isn't with the right team. It's like some other random story. Like, isn't that the race where like Gasly won at Monza, but we didn't talk about that? Right.
Yeah,
like,
right.
That kind of stuff happens because they're not.
Because we were
embedded with the
following
team.
Haas at the time. Yeah.
Right. And you're just like, wasn't there something at this race that they should have mentioned? Right. And they just don't talk about it. Right. So it's kind of weird, but if you don't know,
it makes some of it a little more exciting than it actually is, and sometimes that can backfire. But
if I had to watch the Drive to Survive version of baseball, I'd be all in. I have no desire to watch like baseball for real.
Well, they used to have
like,
that on Sunday morning. This week in baseball.
Right. So that's why I think that, yes, it's my sport. I'm an anorak. I get up, I watch these races. I remember when like if it wasn't on Speed Vision, I didn't know about it, or I had to get like Autosport and wait 7 weeks for it to get here from England because it's the only way I could get any information. I remember that. But I have never felt that way about baseball. So if there was a Drive to Survive about baseball, I'd watch it. And if somebody said to me, oh my God, that's not what happened in game 75 of 600 of that season, I'd be like, I don't care, it's fine.
Yeah. All right. Hey, the next session is something that we enjoy. It's Grace's favorite. It's Albon's Cats. Yes, a little Oompa band just for you, Grace. I thought you would love that.
I did love it.
All
I enjoyed
right.
it.
Hit us with some Albans cast.
Okay, so we talked about the Schumacher movie, and we talked about the very serious side of it. But there are also some humorous things that I enjoyed as well while watching it. I love that they changed the titles as they went through. Like, Ross Brown went from being like mechanic at Benetton to friend. The head mechanic at friend. Like, as the story progressed, Ross Brown. But when he was just like friend, that was hilarious.
Yeah.
Like,
friend.
It's
Hi, friend.
It's kind of like there was a gap in his work history or something. Like, he was just friend now. So, and they did the same thing with Jean. It cracked me up that they just kept changing the subtitle. And then Damon Hill's was really funny too, because the first time they show it, they tell you the year he wins the championship, which is of course a spoiler for later. And so then when they show him the second time, they just say a former world champion. I'm like, well, you should have changed the first one too, because spoiler alert, knowing when Damon Hill wins his championship ruins it later, right?
Yeah.
That's a big storyline. So
I wonder if they had to put like a shot collar on Damon to get him not go ballistic and be all bitter.
Maybe there's 70 hours of footage, and those are just the 2 minutes they could find. I have no idea. It seemed like he seemed so, like, well, it could have gone either way. Oh, yeah, I might have done that.
Yeah, because you know what it was really? He was in there going,
cheap, lying, no good, rotten, four-flushing, low-life, snake-licking, dirty.
That's exactly what he was doing.
Because again, as we saw at Monza, he still feels that way about Michael.
I know. It's like, dude, get over it. I did a TPF stories. Michael Schumacher wasn't your arch nemesis. As much as you want to paint that out, the guy that ruined your career is Jacques Villeneuve.
Well, we should be united on that hate.
Yes. Jacques Villeneuve put paid to your career, my friend.
Let's just right. All reunite and hate that.
Yeah. Schumacher's nemesis was Mika. Everybody knows that.
Slight digression, and I think I've told this story before, but years ago I watched a Genesis documentary. I don't know, we were watching things on TV. But anyway, I thought it was interesting. Tony, who's the keyboardist for Genesis, all these years later, like they're old guys now, and he still is pissed off at Peter Gabriel from when they were like 16 at like, what is he, like 70, right? Like, how old are these? He still is just as pissed off at Peter Gabriel now as he was, when they were like 16 or whatever. That's how I feel about Damon Hill. Like, to his grave, he's still going to be bitter about Michael Schumacher, just the way they were. I was just like, it was the funniest thing for me to watch, that I was just like, yo, come to terms with this, man. It's been a long time.
Don't go old Tony Banks on us, man. Don't do it.
Especially because Peter Gabriel doesn't give a shit. I'm sure he's over it.
He does.
He doesn't care. You're only hurting yourself, Tony. Let it go.
It's funny you say that, because there's so many, albums I could point to for Genesis, but for whatever reason, the other day, I had to hear this. It's one of my favorite songs of theirs. It's the song Mama.
Oh yeah, it's a great song.
Yeah, it's a great tune. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
And then a couple songs later is Home by the Sea. But yes, anyway, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I also love too, because then they cut to Phil Collins, and he's like, I just answered an ad in the paper. They just said they needed a drummer. Like he's just like, well, what the hell did I just roll into? Right. And he became the vocalist because Peter Gabriel was like out. Right. And it just kind of happened that way. But I just loved him retelling the story. He's just like,
well, that parallels because
why are you all yelling at each other?
Yeah, it kind of parallels because, when Senna was gone, then Damon just kind of inherited the role, It's kind of,
So anyway, Damon Hill, bring it down a notch. So so I thought the changing titles was hilarious. I will say that you did just celebrate a birthday.
I did.
I may have, purchased some joyful gift. Although I really think nothing is ever going to top Flex Seal. That is so.
No, Flex Seal was great.
I thought about buying you some mother's car polish, but Flex Seal was so great, right? But anyway, and I was like, it's a good thing that I figured out what I was going to get Todd on Friday, and we watched the documentary on Saturday, because I would have gotten you one of those Jean Todt scarves. That was a very
wasn't that
fashionable
nice?
Scarf that he was wearing.
Yeah, it's probably June, July, and he's in there in a scarf.
He always wore sweaters. Like, it was like, it's easily 90 degrees at Monza, and he's wearing a sweater. Like, God,
he's got a jumper on. I know.
Always. But I thought, that was a very elegant, scarf, and I could have gotten one of those, I'm sure, for Todd. And he also would have worn it, and it would have looked just as,
yes, I could have worn the
elegant.
scarf, yeah.
And then one other thing was, so there's subtitles because people are speaking German or other languages, and except for Flavio Briatore, who's speaking English but still has to be subtitled because you can't understand. Like, well, Flavio's still Flavio, and like, could you imagine if you were on the radio? What?
I know.
Like, you'd have no idea if he ever got on the radio. I can't imagine you'd ever because you can't understand what he's saying. Just like, over TV.
If I drove for Benetton during those, I'd say, okay, I don't understand. Have Steve Matchett radio me because I don't understand what Flavio's saying.
Could somebody else get on the radio? So I love that people are subtitled because they're speaking German, except for Flavio. Right. He's just subtitled. So those are my like lighter side observations. I did also. I know this isn't a MotoGP podcast, but I watched it, so I'm bringing it up anyway. But Dovizioso is back, so Vinales leaving opened up a seat. So they promoted Morbidelli up to the head Yamaha team, and so Dovi's back.
And F1 fans are like,
you should be watching. But I also always think that too when they talk about how you don't need an American race fan. Well, that is clearly true because, like I said, there were like 5 Americans in MotoGP. Did any of y'all watch MotoGP? No, you didn't, and you should be, and you should be now. But it's just not the way Americans are. And I think I mentioned this once before that now the Wizards have Rui Hashimura, who's Japanese, who plays for them. There are lots of Japanese fans at the games now, and they're like business guys. I mean, they're still in like their suits and they just put like a Hashimura jersey over top of them. Americans don't do that, right? Like there's just not like an American shows up and we're like, we're going to games. These guys have never been to a basketball game in their life, but their guys there. And so they're there. And so it's just a different way. We're just not like that here. I mean, Scoot Speed, right? We were all in.
Yeah, right.
So I did want to mention that, and we got 4 more races left, and start watching. It should be pretty good down to the last race.
All right. Fair enough.
All right.
Shall we do some mailbag? Let's do some mailbag real quick.
Sure.
First up, Emil Forsmark says, as I know, Paul likes Ronnie Peterson. Yes, he does.
He sure does.
He's a big fan of Ronnie Peterson. I wonder if you've seen the documentary about him made a few years ago. It's called Super Swede. Well worth a watch and gives more insights to his career. I'm going to go out on a limb and say if there was a documentary about Ronnie Peterson, Paul would have seen it.
I'm sure he has.
I have not, though.
I haven't either. I'm totally going to watch this.
And so now I'm going to run, not walk, and find this because I also liked Ronnie Peterson a lot and want to watch that. And Emil says, greetings from Sweden. Sweden? Emil, my wife is part Swedish. That's her heritage. She's Swedish. There you go. I married her because she looks like Agneta from ABBA. Yeah, it's a Swedish joke.
They're back.
Yeah. I know they're back. Yeah, it's awesome. Benny and Bjorn. Yeah, those guys are awesome. So anyway, thanks for Sweden. Thanks to all of Emil and all of the listeners in Sweden. Love Sweden. I can't not love Sweden. My wife is half Swedish, therefore my daughters are a portion as well. And so there you go. Emil, though, I had to draw the line. Swedish meatballs, I'm on it. But I had to draw the line at Lutefisk.
Yeah, there is some.
Not doing it. And I have a Scottish background, and my relatives draw the line at haggis. They won't.
I was going to say I've had haggis. Haggis is terrible. I don't know why anybody ever.
Yeah. Well, so is Lutefisk. Yeah.
Like there's just some place. And again, I eat scrapple. It's not like I don't
I know.
eat terrible things.
It's not like I'm picky.
No, right. I'm just saying, like
I eat Cheetos.
Cheetos are delicious. They are not good for you. They're completely artificial, but they are delicious.
Yeah, terrible.
Yeah.
It's like eating cheese air. All right, let's see. Next up, Mr. Drury, our friend Mr. Drury says, which do you prefer regarding the post-race interviews? Right after they exit the cars or on the podium as it used to be? Personally, I preferred the on the podium as it gave the drivers a chance to settle from the race and give us such awesome moments as Sir Patrick Stewart drinking from Ricciardo's shoe.
Not good enough, damn it. Not good enough.
I maintain Patrick Stewart was drunk.
So I was at that race, and the whole time, because I was in Canada when we went, and I was just like the whole time, I'm like, does somebody have Patrick Stewart's number? Somebody should check in on him on Monday. Like,
did somebody call him an Uber?
Yeah, right. Like somebody check on that guy. He was very excited about it, and he didn't have they show the pictures of like Lando doing the shoey, and he's like, yeah. like you can immediately see the regret on Lando's face that he did this. Patrick Stewart showed none of that regret. He was just like, yeah, give me your other shoe, right? Like he was all in on that. I'm like, that guy's gonna die, and it's gonna be Ricardo's shoe fault, right?
Yeah, right.
Because I did love, I loved that he walked around the whole time. Because when I watched Ted Notebook, he's still walking around with
no
shoes on.
I know.
Get that guy a second pair of shoes.
Ted was like, get him some shoes. So I actually, I liked it on the podium. For any other reason than they're up higher, and so all of the fans can see them better. And it gives them, like you said, a little time to cool down, collect their thoughts. They get up on the podium, everybody can see them, and they can see whatever they do. And so I tend to like that. Just hopping out of the car and kind of in the whole throng of Parc Fermé is a little more difficult. So I tend to like them up on a podium and being interviewed so everyone can see them.
What I think is most important is don't let it be Felipe Massa that interviews them.
Yeah, boy, he struggled through that one, didn't he?
That is not his strength. And then they had him on the post race with Melissa, not his strength. So I think
who's Melissa?
She's one of the Lawrence Barretto, Will Buxton. There's five of the the Sky people.
Yeah, no F1 people. They're not Sky people.
Oh, I'm sorry. The F1 people. I don't know. Yeah. I only get whatever.
No, Sky, you get Ant, you get PDR, you get.
Yeah. Okay. Well, those people, the Will Buxton people, whoever they work for, Will Buxton and his people. Melissa's one of his people. So anyway, I think regardless of where you do it, most important, have somebody that is actually skilled at asking questions, because that's a skill. Just like we were talking about with the Schumacher documentary. Not anybody can write that kind of question, can kind of act on. Mark Webber, very good. Have Mark Webber do it. He can something happened, I can ask you a question, right? I can change it. Felipe Massa just struggled. It was painful for us. I'm sure it was painful for him. Don't put him in that position again.
Yeah, it's not something that everyone is a natural at.
No, it's a skill, right?
And and it is a skill. So I'd be curious. Let us know who you folks were the most surprised at, who did a great job, who you may not have thought would have been a really good interviewer, but did a really good job.
I think
don't say Felipe Massa, because I know you're lying.
You're right. I think what I missed the most is when they used to have them they used to sit at the table right back in the day.
Yeah,
and Kimi Räikkönen always moved the microphone. And that was always a joke. How long until Kimi Räikkönen messes with the microphone every time? Or then just sits there very bored drinking whatever the Kool-Aid drink that they're drinking. Right. I was always fine with that. But then there was also always Peter Windsor, or then it was Will Buxton, right? It was always a dedicated person that asked those questions. And so then you got better questions because that was somebody's job, and that's what they did. I think I think some of the guest people isn't always a great idea, because you can be a great race car driver. I can't do that and be terrible at asking questions. So those aren't necessarily overlapping skill sets. So
let's see. Lastly, Miles asked, with the recent Schumacher documentary and the Excellent Senna documentary, it seems that there is an appetite for some behind-the-scenes look at F1 drivers. Are there any drivers who you would like to see a documentary of? Personally, I would love to see one on John Surtees. That's a great idea, Miles. I think John Surtees would be a great one. Who won the championship in F1 and motorcycle racing, and Jules Villeneuve, because he was the perfect cross of character, craft, and excitement. I agree, Miles. I think I've talked about this before, and it's a kind of well-known thing that Enzo had one picture on his desk, and it was of Jules Villeneuve. You thought it would have been Fangio or Ascari or any one of those. It wasn't. It was Jules. And so, no, those are two great ones. I would love to see a really well-done documentary on Jim Clark, of course. I'd love to see one on Tazio Nuvolari. I'd love to see one on Jochen Rindt. That would be great. I love your Surtees one. That's great. Like to see one on Felipe Massa. No, I'm joking. Those are the first ones that pop in my. Who pops in your mind?
I was just thinking anybody that you just named, or anybody I remember when we did the pandemic podcast where we did the what's your favorite country? If you had a set of drivers from a country, right? We picked 4 drivers or whatever, and you and Paul had much more, depth because you've been watching longer. And there were a lot of drivers that you guys would talk about. And I'm like, I mean, like I know the name or but I didn't watch it then. So I think there's so much there that it would just be great to have sort of in depth on names that aren't necessarily like the Prost or the Senate, like the names that we could like rattle off from any year, like some of those other storylines. What would be the the Gasly's or the, of the now, right? Like who was the Gasly in 1974? What is his story like? Those are the stories I don't know. I know the Lewis Hamilton stories. I know the Max Verstappen stories of any given year, but I don't necessarily know some of those other drivers that, never got the chance or could have done well or, just weren't in the right place at the right time. I think that there's a lot of space for that. And that would be interesting because I don't know. I didn't watch then. So
yeah, another one that and this is for selfish reason because I really liked him because he's from Kansas City, and so am I originally because we're both from Missouri.
He's from Missouri, where they're all known to be killers of innocent men, women, and children.
That's true.
It is
so is the Kansas City Flash, Maston Gregory. And he's the guy that famously used to jump out of the cars before he hit the tree and crash. So anyway, but he was heavily involved. He was involved in sort of that nucleus of the Ford GT program in the late 60s. He's very entrenched in sports cars, and I would love to see a documentary about him too.
It would be fun too, because even as, like John Surtees, like back then, right? You just race anything, right? And everything. It's not like now where it's much more like you do this and you do this and we all enter a swim lane. So that would be fun too, because you would also get a swath of motorsports as opposed to just a Formula One driver. So
right.
But I think any of that, because you just don't have that history at some point. We're all too young to have known about watch of these folks. So.
Yeah, I think Colin Chapman would be great. Graham Hill would be great. There's a lot of them. So yeah, but it's a great question. Let us know who you guys would like to see one. But anyway, all right. Well, that does it for this podcast. It's great to see Grace back in her McLaren gear. That's awesome. Maybe
I'll be back in it for the next podcast.
Yeah, that's wishful thinking. Right. Don't think so. Come on. Don't. I know.
I have a week. Just let it go. Just let me live this week, and then we can.
All right. So, and then we'll be back next week. I'll try to find Paul. He's somewhere out on the road. He's out doing Paul things, driving fast, and all the craziness that Paul does.
He's driving fast and eating delicious. That's every post.
That is exactly. He's always posting. He's turned into quite the foodie. Every one of his posts are awesome looking food and awesome looking cars. So that's Paul's life. Cars, fast cars, great food, beverages, just Paul's life, man.
That's right.
Airports, delayed flights. Yeah.
We don't talk about that.
We don't talk about that
in the
portion.
Paul Charsley documentary. We just talk about the fast cars and the delicious food. We don't talk about those other things.
Right. Anyway, all right. Well, next week we'll be back to review the Sochi Grand Prix, the Russian Grand Prix. But until that time, be sure to go to the website, theparcfermé.com. Share your opinion. If you like the podcast, go over to iTunes and give us some love. Give us a good rating over there. Thank you so much to our Patreon supporters. We could not and literally would not be able to do this podcast if it wasn't for our Patreon supporters. Not just everybody listening, specifically our Patreon supporters. So thank you. And if you've ever been inclined to support this podcast, you can do so by going to theparcfermé.com. On the right-hand side, it's the support us. Click on that. It'll take you to a couple different ways you can support us. And we would definitely appreciate that. Because again, we would not do this podcast and could not do it without you. So anyway, until I come back next week to review what should be the Russian Grand Prix, this is Todd, a.k.a. Negative Camber, saying so long, Grace.
See you in 2 weeks.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over.
It's not what I feel I've got to prove at all. I don't really want to prove anything. I started as an amateur with no idea or no intention of becoming world champion. I was curious to find out what it was like to